Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Monday, November 10th, 2025. My dear friend, Professor Mohammad Marandi, joins us from Tehran, Iran. We have a slightly different appearance of the show in order to accommodate the technical requirements of connecting with Professor Marandi where he is. Mohammad, it's a pleasure, my dear friend. We were together
Hi,
in
Judge.
Moscow. We were together in Moscow for a week, and we sort of talked about whether or not this could happen. And now here we are chatting with each other as if we're in the same room. How are you?
I'm very good, Judge. I was just telling you before the show, at some point I'm going to have to wear the shirt that Larry gave me in Moscow. So,
Well,
um,
Larry Johnson's shirts are a cause of much amusement here at Judging Freedom, and I'm happy you still have it, and we'll be happy to tell Larry about it. Does the Iranian government understand the Zionist mentality in Tel Aviv that wishes to drive it from office?
yes, I think that is the uh, issue that the Iranians have been dealing with for many decades. In fact, before the revolution, one of the key foreign policy issues that the revolutionaries had against the Shah was Palestine. The Shah was sending oil to the Israeli regime. The Shah was also selling most of apartheid South Africa's oil, and the revolutionaries were very opposed to both. So the issue of the Israeli regime existed among the revolutionary movement for well before the revolution. And over the past few decades, the Iranians have been supporting the Palestinian cause. They support the right of return. The Iranians have always supported a one-state solution where all people in Palestine are equal, and obviously that is going to create great hostility. And over the past 40 some years, Iran has been deeply antagonized simply for pursuing this policy. But now, over the past 2 years, and this is, I think, the greatest mistake that the Israeli regime has made, is that this is becoming something that across the world people are now recognizing and accepting and believing to be the solution, where all human beings across the land of Palestine have to have equal rights and they have to be able to live side by side.
You know, the support for the president's policy, this zealous Zionism that Donald Trump seems to manifest, which regrettably he appears to have reinforced when he addressed the Israeli Knesset last month. The support for it in the United States is hemorrhaging, particularly among young people. And it appears further that the efforts by the Israeli government to engage American public figures, and particularly media types, to stop that hemorrhaging is having the opposite effect of what they have engaged their American friends and colleagues to doing. Are the Israelis trying to influence Iranian public opinion? From time to time, I see a talk by Prime Minister Netanyahu, which appears to be directed directly at the Iranian people.
Yes, but they're not very smart. While it's like the United States government, while they're imposing maximum pressure sanctions against the Iranian people, they speak about their love for the people of Iran. And Netanyahu, as he is carrying out genocide, he's speaking about friendship with the Iranian people. The Iranians see that every day they're murdering people in Gaza, even during the so-called ceasefire, and they're murdering people in Lebanon every day amidst Western media silence. And in the West Bank, they're carrying out ethnic cleansing. And people in the region, in Iran, they see this. And this is not, of course, just Trump. Trump is, I think, more crude about it, or he is pursuing this policy at a time when the Israeli regime is looking in the eyes of the public uh, as a horrible entity, which it is. But this has been U.S. policy for decades. And a lot of the antagonism, Judge, most of the antagonism towards Iran over the past few decades is about the Israeli regime, then the hostility towards Iran, even though and towards Muslims in general. I mean, for example, for Muslims, Christ is king. Why wouldn't he be king? He is infallible. He is in the Quran. His mother is he is a he's a his mother is her name is on one of the chapters of the Quran. The values, I mean, just recently, someone who I respect, Tucker Carlson, although I disagree with him on many issues, he said that, you know, what the Israeli regime is doing to the Palestinians is not Western, it's Eastern. Blood guilt and collective punishment and being born guilty. No, these are, these are not Eastern values. These are not Jewish values. These are not Christian values. These are not Muslim values. These are the values of Zionists. These are the values of neo-Nazis. These are the values of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. But these are not the values of people in the East or West. But there's, I think, a powerful force in the United States that wishes to create hatred and hostility between people to the benefit of entities such as the Israeli regime, first and foremost.
Does why doesn't the government of Iran openly and notoriously develop a nuclear weapon? This would be the greatest defense against Israel. It would be legally developed. They would sign the pact with the United Nations. The Israeli nuclear weapon is totally illegal, but they'd be terrified of attacking you because you'd have that potential nuclear response.
Judge, I know many people in the United States wouldn't believe this because they've been taught to hate Iran and to see Iran as evil. When Saddam Hussein invaded Iran, he would hammer Iranian cities with missiles. And for 2 years, the Iranians did not retaliate. And then the Iranians, they began to retaliate by firing flares over Iraqi cities so that Iraqis would know that Iran could hit back. But the Saddam kept kidding Iran, and he wouldn't stop. And Western governments and the Soviet Union, they would continue to support him. Then, in order to prevent him from continuing the slaughter, they said that every time he strikes Iran, they will strike back, but they will announce 24 hours beforehand that the Iraqis have to evacuate certain cities. And as soon as Saddam would stop hitting Iran, the Iranians would stop. The Iranians then you have another issue. During the war, Saddam was giving chemical weapons, mostly from Germany, the technology, but the United States gave the military and technology to use it and the political cover to get away with it. The same chemical weapons that provided an excuse to invade Iraq.
Right.
The chemical weapons they gave to him.
Right.
During the war, I suffered from 2 chemical attacks. I survived 2 chemical attacks. One was a nerve agent, and the other was mustard gas. It's a horrible weapon. But in any case, during the war, Ayatollah Khomeini, the leader back then, Imam Khomeini back then, commanders and politicians went to him and said, look, we have to make chemical weapons. And he said, no. He said, we will not use chemical weapons because it is against our values. And we didn't. Ayatollah Khamenei, the current leader, he said clearly that this is a weapon that I do not want. Iran has never pursued, even the United States admits Iran since 2003 has not been pursuing nuclear weapons, even though before 2003 Iran was not pursuing nuclear weapons. If Iran wanted nuclear weapons, it would have had it a long time ago. As we speak, after the US attack, the majority of Iranians want nuclear weapons, but still Ayatollah Khamenei says no, because A, it is an immoral weapon, and B, if you start producing nuclear weapons, your neighbors will also want nuclear weapons. And many of them are despots, they're family dictatorships. They're inherently unstable. Look at the Persian Gulf region, they're family dictatorships. So it's unless the state, the country's existence is at threat, then the state doesn't want it. But this shows how sinister the Israeli regime is, that people actually contemplate this regime using nuclear weapons. That's how evil and sinister it is. And yet the United States fully supports it, this ethno-supremacist regime, no matter what it does. And the demonization of Iran continues in order to justify attacks. As we speak, no one is talking about the ceasefire breaches in the West. And these are not breaches; these are acts of murder being carried out against Lebanon and against Gaza. When they killed people in Lebanon, they killed just a few weeks ago. They killed a family of Lebanese Americans, 3 kids and their father. Did the U.S. Embassy do anything about it? No. So this regime does anything it wants to Americans, to Arabs, to Iranians, and people can even contemplate them going far further. But in the West, no one has a problem with it.
Do the Iranians understand that notwithstanding the hemorrhaging of public support for the Netanyahu regime, the President of the United States gives every indication of a zealous unification with that regime, that they can do no wrong, and no matter how horrific is their behavior, the U.S. will finance it. Do the
Oh,
Iranians do the Iranians understand that of Donald Trump?
oh, absolutely. Judge, the Iranians follow U.S. politics very closely, and they know a lot more about the United States than the U.S. government or U.S. elites know about Iran. U.S. elites they get their information from Iranians who go to the United States and say in their think tanks what they want to hear. It's a bubble in Washington. But in Iran, there are English is our second language at university. All of my students, from whatever political persuasions, if they do have political persuasions, all of my students are fluent in English. A lot of people in Iran who don't speak English, they read the news, they read Western Persian language media, they know what's going on. And they saw his speech in the Knesset and how he is bound to the Israeli regime and how he is bound to the donors and how he is obedient to Adelson, for example, or in his actions in the White House. They saw sorry to say this, the circus or the monkey show in Egypt, where these leaders were bowing down to Trump, giving him a pass despite the genocide. They saw all this, and that's something that Iranians find deeply disturbing. The Iranians have a very strong sense of justice, Judge. It's a part of the Iranian culture, and the predominant and Islam, and of course, Shia Islam in particular. Justice is very central to Iranian identity. It goes back to the grandson of the Prophet in Karbala, his sister, and therefore the issue of Gaza for Iranians and Palestine is very key. It is very central. That is why for decades the government has been supporting the Palestinian people. And it's not because they're Muslim. It's not if they were Hindu, if they were Christians, if they were Jews, if they were of any persuasion, what has been going on in Gaza, if it had been happening to any of them, the Iranian position would be the same. The position of Hezbollah in Lebanon, of Ansarullah in Yemen would be the same. This is not about the Palestinians being Muslim. This is something that is unacceptable. In fact, it's in the Iranian constitution, Judge, that Iran has to support the press. Again, this stems from their religious identity. That is why Iran supports Cuba. Cuba is a communist to a large degree, to some extent, anti-religion, less so than before. Venezuela is a Christian country. I mean, Trump, who suddenly cares about Christians, he's bombing people in these boats. They're all mostly Catholic. They're Christian. He's murdering them. In South Africa, Iran was supporting the resistance against the apartheid regime. They're not Muslim. So this sense of supporting the oppressed is deeply, whether the Americans believe it or not, this is a part of Iranian identity. And so what Trump is doing to the Palestinian people outrages people here.
The wonderful observations that you make, Mohammed, particularly about Trump killing Christians on the boat. I suspected most of them were Catholic because they come from Latin American countries, but never actually articulated it as well as you just did. Is Iran today on a wartime footing? does it expect that at any moment the Israelis will attack, followed by their American sponsors?
There are two things here, Judge. One is that the whether Netanyahu is preparing for a war or not is unclear, but the Iranians are preparing for war. In other words, in order to prevent war, they have to be prepared for war. And the Iranians have been, in one sense, fortunate that the Israelis, in the hope to bring about what they call regime change, they gave it all they had. And the Iranians learned a lot about their defensive and offensive capabilities, whereas the Israeli regime knows not so much about Iran's capabilities. And Iran has been strengthening its offensive capabilities and moving to deal with its shortcomings and weaknesses. And I think that if there is another attack by the regime, the Iranian response will be much more aggressive and much more painful. So I don't think that the Israeli regime, if it was fully sane and if they were logical, despite being sinister and evil, I don't think they'd attack. But this is Netanyahu. Netanyahu needs to remain in power. Netanyahu feels threatened. Netanyahu feels that if he's forced to step down, he'll go to jail or may go to jail. So that's why he will continue murdering the Lebanese. He'll continue murdering Gazans. He will continue murdering people in the West Bank. And he may expand the war to Lebanon again, he may attack Iran again. Anything is possible from Netanyahu. But it is not in the interest of the Israeli regime. Even the ceasefire violations right now, they're all working against the regime because people across the globe are seeing that the bloodlust is there. They will not put down their guns. They feel the need to kill people every day.
Mohammed, what is the relationship between Iran and Russia? Is there a defense pact? Is there a defense agreement? Does Russia sell arms to Iran? What is that What is your understanding of that relationship?
Judge, one of the interesting things is that thanks to the United States, thanks to U.S. policy, the relationship between Iran and Russia has improved dramatically over the past few years. The relationship between Russia and China has improved dramatically over the past few years. The relationship between China and Iran has improved dramatically over the past few years. And BRICS countries and all countries that have been targeted by the United States, they've been moving closer to each other. The United States could have always had a reasonable relationship with Iran, but it chose to always push Iran away, even when Iran did deals with the United States, such as the JCPOA, a deal which I think personally Iran gave too many concessions, but still the Iranians did the deal. And Obama from day one violated the deal. And then Trump came and tore up the deal. So how can an Iranian even take seriously the notion of having good relations with the United States? When the Israeli regime attacked Iran, we were negotiating with the
Right,
United States.
right.
And then we find out from Trump himself the other day that he was behind the Israeli attack. So how can we have good relations? So therefore, this creates an incentive for better relations with Russia. The same is true with the way in which the United States has treated the Russians, the expansion of NATO, the Minsk Accords, and all that. That has pushed Russia towards better relations with Iran. So yes, the military relationship between the two countries, the economic relationship, the investment in oil and gas, this is all evolving. And it is the doing of the United States more than anyone else. The United States acts as a catalyst to isolate itself and to bring other countries together.
Wow. So nobody knows what's going to happen next.
It's. I don't think it's clear, but what I do believe, Judge, is that time is not on the side of the Israeli regime. The world has turned against it, and wherever I go, I've been to China since during the last 2 years. I've been to China for different conferences. I've been to Moscow. I had the honor of being with you and Larry and other friends there, Scott. Uh, we've seen how people have turned against the Israeli regime everywhere, and the longer this continues, the worse it is. And the fortunes of the West is going down. Europe is self-destructing, partially because of the foolish war against Russia, which they don't want to end, and they just want to bring down their own economies further. And of course, the United States is isolating itself globally and creating and antagonizing itself among the global community. The weaker the West becomes, the weaker the Israeli regime becomes, because there's no doubt that the Israeli regime is not an independent entity. It is completely dependent on the West. All of its needs are met by the West. And the weaker the West becomes, the worse the situation becomes for the regime. And the fact that it is so despised today in the West as well, not just among liberals and the left, but now among the right, I think is a sign that this regime will not be able to continue slaughtering innocent people with impunity in the coming years. And ultimately, Judge, think when I was young, when I was an activist, when I was 15, I did translation for a magazine, and I was working on both South Africa and Palestine and Latin America, because Iran supported liberation theology in Latin America. And I was writing about that or translating about that. I never thought, and no one that I knew thought, that apartheid South Africa would fall so swiftly. And it did. And the Israeli regime, in the eyes of some, seems like some sort of invincible entity because the Americans will be behind it forever. Well, young Americans are not supporting it, and older Americans are waking up, and people across the world have already woken up. And this regime will not be able to survive. And the smart thing to do is, and I have to stress this, Judge, that Jewish heroes who've stood up against the Israeli regime are at the forefront of the resistance, the axis of resistance and the broader resistance. They are comprised of people from all walks of life in different religions. And many of those are Jews that have played a heroic part. We have Jews in Iran. We have a Jewish MP, according to the Constitution of the Islamic Republic of Iran. The Jewish community in Iran is anti-Zionist. The Israeli regime has tried for years to convince these people to leave, and they haven't. And their synagogues are here in Tehran and in other cities. They have kosher restaurants, but they're not Zionists. So this Judaism, which is an Eastern, it is was born in this part of the world. For us, again, Moses is king.
Right.
This religion, which was born in this part of the world, which is not Western or Eastern, it is, we see increasingly that young Jews and Jews across the world are against this genocide and against apartheid. So I don't think that the Israeli regime can last. I'm not saying it's going to collapse tomorrow, next week, next month, or next year, but I think it is inevitable that justice will prevail.
Are you surprised that the butcher, who is now the president of Syria, will be in the Oval Office with the president of the United States in about an hour from the time that we're speaking with each other? Somebody who boasted about his slaughters, had pictures of him holding the body parts he cut off of people, had a $10 million bounty on his head until the MI6 and CIA persuaded the State Department to drop the bounty. Now he's going to be welcomed into the White House.
There's a young woman who was murdered in 2014 called Serena Sheem. She was a Press TV reporter. She was Lebanese American, an American citizen. She was on the Turkish border with Syria. And she was reporting how World Food Organization trucks were being used to take in ISIS and ISIS troops, as well as ammunition, into Syria in the area of Kobani or Ain al-Arab at that time. And then Turkish intelligence said that she's a spy. And she said this live on Press TV television, that the Turkish intelligence, they say I'm a spy. I'm not a spy. I'm just reporting. And she died hours later. And her family and those who know her and people at Press TV believe that the Turkish intelligence murdered her. And the Turkish government says no. Of course, I don't have the facts, but the reality is that they believe that she was murdered, and because of what she was covering. These people, ISIS and Al Qaeda, are a creation of the United States. And General Soleimani, who Trump murdered, he was the leading figure in fighting ISIS and Al Qaeda. And then Trump murdered him. A few days ago, Trump's son spoke about Iran, and if, he said that if Iran develops a bomb, they'll use it against the Western way of life, a nuclear bomb. As I said, Iran wasn't even willing to make chemical weapons. Why would Iran want to use nuclear weapons? And then he speaks about, his father murdered a senior Iranian general who was fighting against ISIS and Al Qaeda. And then he says
Let
Iran
me
is.
just stop you for a minute. This picture from the Newsweek cover is General Soleimani, who was
Yes,
murdered by the CIA using drones as he was in Baghdad attempting to negotiate peace.
exactly. At that time, Judge, ISIS and Al Qaeda were in the American camp, and Qatar and other oil and gas rich countries were funding it. Mr. Erdogan was funding it. The Israeli regime was supporting it alongside their borders, and all of it was a part of an American project, something which Trump himself admitted. He initially, at one point, criticized Obama about it, but then when he came to power, it was business as usual. But the United States created ISIS and Al Qaeda, just as they did the same in Afghanistan earlier. And it's ironic that the United now after all these years, the United States created it. Then Trump speaks about him destroying it, even though that's not true. But then he invites one of the senior figures in ISIS, who later went and became the head of Al Qaeda in Syria. ISIS sent him there. He was a part of ISIS. He was sent to Syria to lead the Nusra Front. That was the Islamic State of Iraq's Syrian branch. Then there was a division over power. They got into a fight. He became, and then Al Qaeda Central supported him, supported Jolani, supported Ashara. Al Qaeda Central supported him, and that's what made ISIS break away from Al Qaeda. So he was the head of Al Qaeda. Then he departed from Al Qaeda with the consent of Al Qaeda. And that departure was done on television, I think 8 or 9 years ago. I don't know exactly, with Al Qaeda leaders sitting beside him, basically saying yes. Why? Because they wanted to create a new image for him, and gradually he was brought to power. So the same ISIS and Al Qaeda that the West was supporting, and the oil and gas rich US proxies in our region were funding, they're now in power. And so he goes and meets the head of CENTCOM. He had a sort of love fest with Petraeus. I'm sure you saw it, where
But
Petraeus
we
was.
all saw that it was revolting. It was stomach
It's
turning.
it's stunning. And he plays basketball with the head of CENTCOM. This is the world that we live in.
Right.
And what has happened, Judge, is that so many people who before believed this fake Syrian revolution and believed that this was about freedom of democracy, they've woken up. People who for so many years were supporting these terrorists, they've said to me and to others that we were wrong. At least the silver lining in all this horror is that people are waking up, that whenever the CIA is behind a project, whether it's in Syria or in Libya, it's not going to end well for the people. And another point, Judge, in Nigeria, who is killing? First of all, the people who are being killed are not Christians, they're Christians and Muslims. Who is doing the killing? It's Boko Haram and other such groups. Who created these groups? The same oil and gas rich dictatorships that the United States supports. Most of the money, Judge, in Africa that comes from these gold mines and other mines that are being uh, stolen by people who are funding or controlled by people who are funding these terrorists. The money goes to banks in the United Arab Emirates. That's where the money is laundered. Everyone knows this. The drugs in Afghanistan that they went during the U.S. occupation there, were increasing in such huge proportions, and then they complained about Venezuela. The drugs in Afghanistan, where did the money go? It all goes through the United Arab Emirates, a key U.S. ally. So that ISIS, Al Qaeda, these Wahhabi groups. I mean, Qatar's major mosque is called the Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab Mosque. So these Wahhabi Salafi groups are created by U.S. allies. The money laundering from most of these terrorist operations and these illicit uh, mines that are plundering the resources of Africa, thanks to these terrorist organizations destroying so much of Nigeria and the Sudan and elsewhere. The money is being laundered in the United Arab Emirates. So who is the United States government to complain about Nigeria or South Africa or Venezuela or Palestine or Lebanon or Iran or Russia?
Mohammed, a great conversation. You have such a masterful understanding of this. Will you come back and visit with us again? I know we had to jump through some hoops to get this to work over the internet, but apparently we've succeeded with your help and with the help of my terrific producer.
It's always an honor. Whenever you tell me to come on your show, I'll always be there. Although you have much better guests, but it is always an honor.
Listen, the last time you were on the show, they were bombing the building you were in.
Well,
Hopefully that won't happen today.
yeah, I'm good. Don't worry about it.
Thank you, Mohammed. All the best, my dear friend. We'll look
Thank you,
forward to
Judge.
seeing you again soon.
Me too.
Thank you. What a great man with a marvelous understanding of the country he was born in Virginia, USA, raised in Ohio, now a superstar professor in Tehran. Coming up at 2:30 this afternoon, Kyle Anzalone on the monster being welcomed in the Oval Office by President Trump. Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.